Can you hear me well?
Yep.
All right, so I don't know why my Wi-Fi today just keeps being refreshed. I don't know. So sorry. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. Thank you so much for joining us today in this third workshop in our series of an interesting session about building and deploying AI models using decentralized computing resources. And again, today we are going to welcome a representative from Exabit. But today we are going to welcome Russ, the Chief Sales Officer from Exabit. And today we are going to welcome Director of Engineering at Thomson Reuters Lab. She is joining us from India, I think. And thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today. I guess we are going to start off by a very quick introduction section. Hey Shisha, why don't you start your turn first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Shirsha. I work at Thomson Reuters. My specific area of focus within TR is to look at the different content and editorial workflows and look at bringing AI-driven efficiencies in those workflows. Super excited to be on this discussion today and happy to share my insights. Over to you.
Hi. Yeah, thanks. Russ Vetrano. I'm the Chief Sales Officer at Exabits. Prior to joining Exabits, I spent 15 years working with and for AI companies, including a few years at Microsoft. It became very clear to me that GPU compute was going to fuel the next evolution of AI. So I was really excited to join Exabits to become an enabler by providing high quality, affordable compute so that companies of all sizes, not just the largest ones, have an equal opportunity to participate in this evolution. So happy to be here today. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just lost you guys. I'm not sure if if Shisha or Russ already introduced.
We did. We
I
both did
just
We
already.
couldn't
did.
hear anything.
We did.
Oh yeah, all right. Sorry. I don't know why. What's wrong with my Wi-Fi today? I really need to check it. All right. So for today, we are gonna talk about the adoption of decentralized computing resources from enterprise point of view, because Shisha, she has a lot of experience working for enterprises, and right now she is working for Thomson Reuters, and we are going to talk about the security, compliance, or any other concerns enterprise may have when they
Whoops, we lost
Did
her.
I lose? Yep.
No, her internet's going in and out today. Um, so I have some of the questions here, so I can always move us along. So what she wants to talk about is, real world use cases, the challenges
Yep.
in decentralized solutions, and addressing enterprise concerns. Um, so I guess I'll kick off with the questions like and Srisha, you and I can go back
Yep.
and forth
We
on
can do
these.
that.
Yeah. So what are the biggest barriers enterprise face when training and deploying AI models today? So I'll let you go ahead and start, and I can answer on top of that.
Sure. So, can you hear me? You can hear me
Yes, I
okay,
can.
right? Okay. So to answer your question in terms of like, what are the biggest challenges or, biggest barriers that enterprises face when they are looking at AI deployment? I think, while the data privacy and the whole aspect around ensuring the governance of the solution that is getting built with the AI in place, right, is definitely one of the primary concerns. But equally important becomes to the enterprise, the cost efficiency of that solution. Many a times we've encountered situations where, as we've designed the solution for bringing that AI led automation in that workflow, we encounter a situation where it's possible that the cost of the final solution is exceeding the original cost of that workflow, and then it makes us go back to the drawing board to revisit those design choices and see what should be done differently. And so in my mind, these are the two primary, I won't say barriers as much as aspects to be kept in mind when we're looking at building solutions for enterprises.
Yeah, very good. For a while, when I was working with AI companies, I was on the data side. So I would provide training data to any company building speech recognition, computer vision, healthcare, large language models. And while I was providing access, data for them, the other thing that I saw they were having a difficulty with was getting access to compute. And if you go back just 12, 18 months ago, some of the mid-sized smaller companies, there was a GPU shortage. They couldn't get it. And when you look at the fact that 70% of the GPU compute is controlled by the hyperscalers, they were determining who was getting access to compute and who was not. It's one of the reasons why I joined Exabits, because I wanted to be one of those companies that was, providing that compute. So the access to compute was definitely one of the things. And like you said, the cost. The cost of a GPU server is several $100,000, and a lot of smaller companies simply can't afford to go out and buy a couple of servers. So the ability to rent GPUs is more cost effective, or in some cases, rent them on demand. Not everyone's needs for GPUs is static. A lot of people have a dynamic need, so then they get to go ahead and use them as they go. And then with the whole decentralized distributed architecture, solving the problems of latency in country region. If you're in Europe for GDPR reasons,
Yep.
you don't want access to GPUs in the US. The same thing with the US or other countries. So that decentralized or distributed architecture is very, very good for those companies who need to access that. So that's some of the things that I have seen has been, barriers facing enterprise.
Hi, Rose, and hi, Shisha. Uh, Thank you so much for your time, and I cannot handle the MA today, so I'll take over the stage.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing, Shisha and Ruth. I think that Ruth shared the really good and really interesting point about the cost of the compute, and especially when it comes to the commitment that small team and individuals can
Yeah.
have to commit with the centralized providers like Amazon or Oracle. We need to commit for a long term and to pay upfront. So I think that is the huge barrier
Yeah.
for the small or the startups. And you know that all the good idea now comes from small team or even like some group of students or young developers. So I think that compute give them opportunities to turn their idea to reality when it comes to AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that I have another question for both of you, like especially Shisha, when you work for the big enterprise, like why are enterprise looking for beyond traditional cloud providers for AI compute?
Um, from my experience, Lee, I mean, we've looked at, I think, we've across, when I attend conferences and when I've attended summits, and when there's always this discussion around the AI solution, and creating those differentiators. Everybody wants to see if there's an opportunity in building, sometimes fine tuning their own models, right, with maybe their domain specific data. And I hear this a lot when I meet folks from, let's say, pharma or bioinformatics and those kind of companies. And so in their cases, oftentimes it's experimental. At the same time, the access to the hardware, like Russ just mentioned, is not always there. Um, Added to which, I think it's the access to the skills of a skilled team that can help them to be guided on this process is also like a deterrent. However, they would like to experiment and sort of close the gap, and see if this is a differentiation that they could bring in their industries. And probably this is one of those reasons why some of these cloud provider and to truly feel like there's an opportunity for them to bring a differentiated AI service, right? And to be able to go beyond what they're seeing as part of the mass adoption today.
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. And I talk to a lot of these small companies, and they're running on Amazon and Google and Microsoft, and they provide fantastic services, but they tend to be more expensive. And a lot of the smaller companies feel like they don't get the support and attention they need. If you're a large enterprise customer, yes, those big cloud providers, they're going to help you. If you're a small company and you need a couple of GPU servers, they don't want to invest the time, and they don't have the support staff because they're focused on big. So I have had a lot of customers tell me they like the support that they get from a company like Exabits that's smaller, more willing to work. I talked about the flexibility as well, the ability to rent a couple of GPUs on demand is very attractive to them. So those are some of the things that they look for, why they're maybe looking beyond cost, flexibility, location, hands-on support. And there's a lot of decentralized, distributed cloud providers in this space, and they all offer some of those same advantages. Companies and partners that Exabits works with in the space.
Yeah, I think that Urs just answered my like I was about to ask Urs about like what makes a decentralized GPU like kind of like an alternative to the centralized providers at the moment, and we can see that the good point about the support.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree. When it's hard to reach out to the AWS to ask for some instant support, so we can reach out to Exabit or another alternative providers. I think that there's a lot of decentralized compute
Yeah.
providers at the market right now, and they're doing really good job. Like we can see Akash for not for AI models, but they are doing good job for the video render for content
Yeah.
creators. Yeah, and Exabit for AI models. And I think that uh, you both know that AI models required a stable and the high quality GPU. So I have another question for us, like what are the key optimization except bring to decentralized AI compute? Because we all know that the latency,
Yeah.
the yeah, the privacy is another challenge for AI model, especially when it comes to the
Oh yeah.
yeah.
And not all not all GPUs are equal. So one of the things that's a foundation to Exabits, like we call ourselves the base layer compute. All of our GPUs are sourced in tier 3 and tier 4 data centers. So we're making sure that the GPUs that we work with that are optimized are in data centers that have the proper cooling, the proper power, right? The proper bandwidth, so that you're not getting bottlenecked or you're not getting outages. So the first thing we're doing is working with quality compute and then quality data centers. And then we provide some of our own proprietary technology for stabilization of GPUs, for GPU accelerations. We've done a lot of benchmarks where our RTX 4090s run 2 to 3 times faster than others. So there's things that we're doing to make sure that if you're renting from Exabits, you're getting a higher value because our efficiency stability is working. And another thing, kind of with Exabits and other, like what makes GPU clusters and distributed architectures better is we're starting to see a lot of data centers pop up. So rather than getting these huge monolithic data centers that need a nuclear reactor to power them, you're getting a lot of smaller data centers put all over the world in small locations. And companies like Exabits, we can go into those data centers very easily and put a cluster or two of GPUs in there to serve our community. So really coming to the edge, really being distributed, really having, optimized high quality GPU. So those are some of the things that Exabits is doing.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. What's your take on this, Shisha, from your point of view? When I've started sharing about the centralized compute, how Exabit leveraging everything to make sure that it meet the needs of AI models. Do you see any challenges, or do you have any concern adopting the decentralized compute, like
It,
from your point of view, from like totally developer point of view?
Yep. I can share from my notes, what might be for an enterprise typical, barriers to adopting a decentralized AI, infrastructure. And happy to have, I think, Russ kind of contrast some of these points and say how Exhibits, differentiates themselves, right? And, how they lower the barrier. Um, I'll have to go back to the point that I made, that is security and privacy, right? Like I think
Absolutely.
this continues to remain for large enterprises the number one risk as they'd see, right? Going looking at another infrastructure landscape just means an increase in that surface area that needs the security oversight, and hence, having that governance, uh, you know exhibited by this decentralized landscape to sort of reinforce these, what steps have been taken to overcome these concerns, I think become primary. um, the second thing is, I think, for an enterprise, if you're looking at the decentralized AI infrastructure to also serve your AI inference needs, not just the training but also the inferencing, then stability and reliability become paramount, right? You want your AI to have business impact, and hence there are certain SLAs associated with it. And so I'm sure, when you're looking at a decentralized architecture, you want to ensure the reliability of this ecosystem, right? There's also maybe, sometimes it is perceived that there is a high initial cost to setting up an infrastructure like this. And maybe this is a myth, and not as much in reality, but it is perceived that in order for an organization, like if they have to go and set themselves up GPU clusters, right, there's a investment and there is a fear of that sunk cost bias coming in as well, right? And so if this decentralized architecture allows for mechanisms to not perceive it this way, or like debunk some of these myths, that's a great welcome sign. I'll have to, I think, go back to my security point to also add that I think sometimes there are regulatory concerns around, what sort of infrastructure is allowed, like you said, in country, right? So it's important for the decentralized infra provider to sort of be mindful of these regulatory challenges. And also, since this is your non-traditional infrastructure, you will have to probably understand what ramp does it take for us to look at, like, scaling, right? So if you're looking at, geographically looking at different countries to take your service to, or scale to the next 100 users with your new feature set, then you probably want to ensure that there is infrastructure, and get that in agreement also with your AI hardware provider, right? Added to which, I think this was a fear long time back with cloud, and some of it still continues to remain as IT leaders mature across the ladder, right? Like there was this fear that if you put your IP on the cloud, that your competitors are going to get to know it, and some of that is probably still lingering. And so if there are ways to debunk this myth as well, I think this is going to be really good. And finally, I think the last point that I had was, the architecture that we seem to embrace today continues to get more and more complex with the different services, third party and in-house services that gets built. And so is this an added layer of complexity that this decentralized architecture is going to bring in? Albeit this is a much less lower concern than the ones that I've mentioned so far, but nonetheless, this comes up in conversations.
And just to second what you're saying, security and reliability, 100%. So when I mentioned that we only work with tier 3 and tier 4, those are the highest tier databases, and a lot of the data centers we work with are, for example, SOC compliant, ISO compliant. So I work with enterprises. I've already had several enterprises ask me to show them the SOC compliant certificate, or answer some security questions, or furnish the SOC 2 report. So that's a requirement for working with certain enterprises. And if you're working with healthcare, they may want to see a HIPAA certification. So 100%, and I offer an SLA with my, GPUs for reliability and uptime. So those are table stakes for enterprise. So 100% agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah, when when Shisha raised a lot of concern from the enterprises, and rest, like I think that explained some to Shisha. I think that there's a challenge from the point of view, like decentralized compute, like Exabit or AIxBlock. We have a marketplace for decentralized
Yeah.
GPU. What we did not do good is educating enterprises. I think that it decentralized computing is still a new term to
Yeah.
enterprise or traditional um, businesses. They just knew the term, but they don't know what exactly under the hood. Is it just the bubbles or another Web3 trend or something? But as Russ explained, I think that there's the real architecture and technology that we are trying to apply and develop to meet the needs of the enterprises. Because I think whenever we say we talk about decentralized, we want to really make AI accessible to anyone.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that we are on the same page of that mission. Um, so I have another question for both of you. So, um, what do you think? Like, do we need any like framework for decentralized compute provider like Exabit or another providers to for ensuring the secure model training in decentralized environment? Like from Shisha, do you think that there's need any framework or checklist for the providers?
I think Lee Russ was mentioning that they do not onboard data centers and infrastructure which is not the highest SOC compliant, right? That itself is actually like a very good framework, right? Like these are already established governance around the data centers, and so upholding some of this, I think, already enables us to have a framework. Anything else that you might want to add to that, Rose?
Well, there's different kinds of decentralized compute. So there's a lot of companies that are doing a great job. I'm going to call it aggregating community, right? And in those cases, those GPUs will come from crypto miners, they'll come from gamers, and they're viable opportunities for compute. But maybe they don't have SOC compliancy, or maybe they're not housed in a tier 4 data center, but they can be very viable uses of compute for different systems. So I think people need to educate, like, okay, if I'm renting from Exabits, my GPUs are coming from a data center. If I'm renting from, like, an INET or an Aether or something, maybe my GPUs are coming from community, and there's different price points, different factors for what you're doing. So I don't know if there's a one size fits all framework. If you are working for enterprise, there is a framework that's going to have to be more compliant, more reliable. And then, some people don't need the security, some people do. So I really think it's about educating. So you're right. When I go talk to enterprises, there's an almost immediate like, oh, you're a decentralized or distributed cloud provider, you're not going to have the same reliability. So I have to spend part of my conversation with them telling them where my GPUs come from, how stable they are, what we can do. So I do have to kind of prove that out a little bit. I think that'll change over time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Whereas, because when I jump into the decentralized compute, everyone talk about the nodes, like the individual with the crypto miners or gamers, they contribute their
Yeah,
compute, they idle compute from their computer, and it cannot handle AI models for sure.
yeah,
But there's a lot of compute providers like Exabit or AIxBlock. We also on board. Most of them are data centers because we know what AI model needs to be.
and there's a difference even there too. So, and Ha and I were having this conversation. We were at Denver, and she was like, "Oh wow," she goes, Exabits, when we rent through our API, you're renting a VM, an entire virtual machine. You're getting a fully dedicated GPU. Other providers are renting like containers, so you're getting a portion of a GPU. So she's like, "Wow, when I look at this provider renting me a container and Exabit's renting me a VM, I'm actually a lot less expensive." So there's a lot of things as well that people have to understand what they're exactly renting when they do rent something.
Yeah, totally agree. Shisha, do you want to add in any point?
I think Lee, this is a culture, right? Like, so this is a transformation, and this is like going to be a new culture. And I think even though there are users, it's not so widely talked about. And so once this movement comes up, and like this is more like an established way of leveraging decentralized architecture, I think we will definitely have people writing literature about how because of having used decentralized architecture, they are able to bring in more cost effective innovation, right? So I'm looking forward to looking forward to that day, like when you see papers on what business challenges were overcome because of having leveraged decentralized, and not just the hardware gap. There's also, I think, two points that Russ made were very good. One was, that different companies have like a different security need, right? And so I think engaging with the decentralized architecture, or yet another team, allows you to sort of also be in a consulting mode with a team which has done this for other companies, right? And so if I'm a startup who's kind of getting into the space, I probably want to work not with a generalized, cloud provider, but more like somebody who's provided niche GPU hardware, and maybe to some very specialized niche area that I am, like you mentioned crypto mining, or you mentioned let's say online betting, or whatever that is, right? And so these require, I think, like these are like it's almost like you want to also consult with this team, while of course you want to use that architecture, but you also want their guidance on what governance, what security means here, and are there opportunities to craft more creative business models even, right, around this.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think this, as this movement gathers force, Russ, it's my belief that this will allow us, I mean, this will allow like newer business models to flourish. This will allow new ways of incentivizing this as well, right? Like, you're talking about the VM versus a container cost effectiveness, but perhaps there are even token wise billing, that there are newer and more creative
100%.
ways that can come up. Yeah.
Yeah. So the token thing is very interesting in this space because we allow Exabits has not launched our token yet, but we will, and it'll allow people to basically invest in their own compute.
Yep.
So they can buy extra tokens, and then
Yep.
they'll get to vote and make decisions and get a reduced price on their compute. But also think of like an ecosystem, like think of like gaming. right? So, and companies do this very well. Gamers have, high-end laptops with, NVIDIA GPUs. So if they can rent their GPUs to community or to certain companies, and then those companies in turn use those GPUs for the gaming companies to develop. It's almost like they're self-funding their own ecosystem. So it's interesting in how that works. So I do agree. And then we look at things like tokenization for, we like to look at companies that are building like open AI models on top of like Exabits compute. And then the tokenization allows people to contribute to those models or contribute to data collection. So the tokenization is a great part of the Web3 ecosystem in development of models and compute and everything else.
Yeah, I totally agree with us. I think that token is kind of like the beauty of Web3 when we involve the community to
Yes.
yeah to one project. When you contribute uh, your GPU and you can earn some tokens and you contribute to the project. If the project gets stronger, your tokens will get stronger as well. So like we go together. So I think that kind of different. And another thing that it off topic the decentralized compute, but I think that when I involve in Web3, I can see the beauty is actually that we don't see each other as a competitors.
Yeah.
You can see everyone is the partners. We go together and we develop involve together. That's what I love about Web3. And another question I'm really curious from Shiva as a like not only from your point of view as a director from the enterprise, but as a developers. What is your concern when someone bring the decentralized compute to you, like for you to try it out for the model? So, what your thought like? Do you yeah you have any like the concern if
as,
like
as a as
yeah.
a practitioner, right? As a practitioner, Lee, I think the first thought that strikes me is, do I have the right skill set to be able to use the decentralized architecture, right?
Mhm.
Does it require me to have new skills? We're used to a cloud provider and his services and the concept itself, and there's always like a technical account manager who's going to kind of simplify and dumb it down if if there are new things to be picked up. And so the first thought that comes up when you're looking at decentralized architecture and where you have access to the hardware, right, like in the way that we just described with the community field, the first thought is, do I have the right set of skills? um, and let's say you have a platform or you have set of tools which enables you to go at that same speed, and you don't really need a different set of skills altogether. I think the second thought that strikes me, back to your point of how this is like blockchain, like a community, is that this is going to really democratize innovation, right? And by that I mean that because it's decentralized, because it's cost effective, um, every every practitioner can then go after building that use case, that idea that they're after, right? And it therefore makes innovation accessible to, I think, vast majority of people. That's what I believe is one of the really advantages. I also think that as an individual practitioner, I let's say I had my own GPU, I wouldn't have to, like, I will have to then understand a lot more in terms of what is needed to be, around the fault tolerance aspect of it, around the resiliency and all of that, right? And so all of this is, I think, simplified by this by this decentralized GPU provider, who then kind of is responsible for all those aspects, while at the same time it is not superlative expensive for me as a practitioner.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with some of that. So, when we look at people moving from maybe a big cloud provider to Exabits, right? There's definitely things that, like, a lot of our GPUs that we run are going to be bare metal. So, to put things like Kubernetes and stuff on top requires a little bit of work, either from us helping the customer or the customer doing themselves. So we're that customers need to be a little bit more compute slash GPU savvy to do that. And if they are, they're going to get, much better pricing, much more control. They might have to get, they can use their own or existing data storage solutions. So they might have to put things together where AWS or GCP or Azure might have like everything together in one system all lined up for you. So there is more work to do when you're working with decentralized. There's different data providers, there's different GPU providers. So you'll have to work, you have to be a little bit more cognizant of how to set up the whole architecture for yourself. But the benefit is gonna be great. I mean, you own it, you control it, and it's just gonna be a lot less expensive.
Yeah, interesting points, because I want to hear from like the user's point of view and the provider's point of view to see how we can narrow the gap, because sometimes we didn't hear the end users. Like I was quite surprised when Shisha concerned about the skill set, because I quite assumed that as a developer they know everything. They're doing complicated coding, and they don't mind to exploring. And I don't think this gonna be a complicated skill set, but it might be the challenge for developers, and that's something we might be work on for maybe educating, or like simplify the technical process for developers to access the decentralized computing, because there's a lot of benefit,
Yeah,
uh, cost effective. And one thing I can see is the on demand renting.
yeah.
It's a huge benefit for especially the individual developers when they just
Yes,
need
they might need a little bit of help on writing
Mhm.
to an API, right? The
Yeah,
API is going to be
exactly.
a little bit more, I'm not going to say more complicated, but, they're going to have to write to an API. And, maybe they're going to have to learn how to install an operating system on a GPU. So, yeah, there are definitely some training things that, maybe could make it a little bit easier for them.
Yeah, yeah. I can see that it's from AIxBlock team.
Yeah,
It was easy to set up the API to
yeah.
execute.
So like AIxBlocks, working with your team, Lee and Ha, like when we started this project together 6 months ago, our API was not as robust. And it took feedback from Ha going, I really would really like this in the API. I'd like to be able to see how many GPUs or the price or the this. So we've continually taken customer feedback, said, okay, we have to improve it. It took maybe too long to set up a GPU. So there are things that we're going to continue to improve upon from working with great customers like AIxBlocks on how do we make our API even better.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. And I think that we have just another last question. So for both of you, so how do you see decentralized AI compute evolving over the next few years?
Shirsha, you want to go first?
Uh, I'll follow you, Russ, this time.
Okay, so here's a vision we have. So for decentralized compute, distributed computing, right now when you look at where are people putting their data centers, it's North America, it's Europe, starting to see some in Asia, right? There's very little build out in South America. So where do those people? They only have centralized. What about in Africa, right? So we need to get more global on decentralized. I think you're going to see data centers go smaller, right? As power and consumption and stuff become very cost prohibitive, I think you're going to see data centers come online that are more like, more towards power neutral and being able to, use the power to like, heat cities or something like that. So there's a lot of effect going in place to make these data centers more efficient, and the power and the heat generated from GPUs can be used to use other things around. And then lastly, if you talk to Exabits founders and where they'd love the world to be in years, think about when you need power, regular power to run, anything. You plug into a light switch, right? And you don't know if that's Silicon Valley Power Company or New York City Power Company. You just plug in and you get. So the same vision. We want you to be able to plug in and you get compute, right? And how do we set up that where everybody's got access to compute in a completely decentralized way, just like the internet or power is today? So that's far more far-fetching, but that's where we're investing and where we want to go.
Yeah, thank you. What's your take on this, Shirsha?
Lee, I think totally agreeing with what Russ is saying, that this is going to democratize. I'm thinking that this is also going to make the whole AI development space that much more inclusive, right? We've always, of late, being told that this is a game of those few big players, but I think um, the power of decentralized architectures is to make this whole game that much more inclusive for every small and big player. It's about making our ideas that much more resilient, right? Like, you start small, you scale big, and it, I think, ensures that we can invest in a digital future. So it's not that one company pulls the plug off and a set of users are cut off, right? And so I think this ensures security for our ideas, and ensures that we can sustain these solutions that we are building in a profitable way, even, right? And going back to the point where this is inclusive, this is the blockchain movement, right, for AI. It only makes sense that we continue in this movement and we go towards this vision.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shirsha and Russ. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insight. And I think that it was a really interesting workshop when we share about the decentralized computing. We have the point of view, the perspective from Exabit and Shirsha as the leader in AI. Once more time, thank you so much for your time today.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you very
hope
much,
to
guys,
see
for
you in the
participating.
future event.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.